My wife says every guy at her office wants a piece of her. Frankly, so do I, if she'd stop handing them out like party favors. I'm Nick Dalton, 42 years old, and I've been dispatching emergency calls for the city for 18 years. You learn to read voices in this job. Panic, lies, desperation, they all have their own frequency. So when my wife Mara started using that same rehearsed tone she'd practiced for her office presentations, I knew something was wrong. "Oh, stop being jealous," she said that Tuesday morning, stirring her coffee with theatrical precision. "What's wrong with going on dates with my coworkers? They all have a chance with me, so stop being jealous or I'll file for divorce." I looked up from my scrambled eggs. After 16 years of marriage, I'd heard this threat before. Usually I'd apologize, promise to trust her more, maybe buy flowers. Not today. "Okay," I said. "I'll file for you." The coffee mug slipped from her fingers, clattering against the kitchen table. No, you misunderstood." "I understood perfectly," I replied, cutting my eggs with deliberate calm. "And I've decided I should divorce you." Mara's face went white. For the first time in months, she wasn't performing. This was real panic, and I recognized it immediately from my dispatcher training. Her breathing quickened, pupils dilated, voice pitch rising. "Nick, honey, I was just testing you. You know I love you. I'd never actually—" "Testing me?" I set down my fork. "With what exactly? Your dates with Greg Palmer from accounting." She froze. I'd been saving that name for the right moment. "How did you—" "Same way I know about the hotel receipts in your purse. Same way I know you've been telling your friends that any guy would be lucky to have me. Same way I know your mother's been coaching you through these little speeches." Mara's mouth opened and closed like a fish. In my headset at work, we called this system failure, when someone's story collapsed and they couldn't reboot fast enough. "You've been going through my things?" "Didn't have to. You left your purse open on the counter yesterday. Hotel receipt from the Marriott downtown, dated last Friday. Signed, Mr. and Mrs. Palmer." "Real subtle, Mara." She sat down hard in her chair. "It's not what you think." "Really?" "Because I think you've been playing some kind of psychological game, weaponizing jealousy to keep me dancing while you run around town. Am I close?" The silence stretched between us. Outside, our neighbor Pete Russo was starting his truck for his morning shift at the security company. Pete and I had been friends since high school, back when Mara was still pretending to like my blue-collar friends. "I need time to think," Mara finally said. "Take all the time you want. I'll be at work doing my job. You know, that boring dispatcher thing that pays for this house and your car and your little adventures." I stood up, grabbed my lunchbox, and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard Mara's phone buzzing, probably calling her mother, Janet Broome, who worked in HR at Mara's company and had never liked me. Janet thought her daughter had married beneath her station. Maybe she was right. Maybe Mara had married beneath her station. But I was about to show both of them what this blue-collar guy could do when he put his mind to it. At the dispatch center, I settled into my usual chair and put on my headset. My shift partner, Rita Gonzalez, was already fielding calls. "You look like hell," she said during a break. "Trouble at home?" "You could say that. Rita, you still talk to your cousin who works at Morrison and Associates?" "The law firm? Yeah, why?" "I might need a good divorce attorney." Rita raised an eyebrow. "Finally had enough of Princess Mara." That was Rita, never one to sugarcoat things. She'd met Mara at the Christmas party 2 years ago and immediately pegged her as trouble. "Something like that. Can you get me a name?" "Celeste Lang. They call her Cece the Cleaver. She doesn't mess around." I made a note of the name. Around us, the dispatch center hummed with activity. Emergency calls, radio chatter, the constant background noise of a city that never quite slept. This was my world. Practical, direct, no nonsense. Mara's world was all about appearances, office politics, and games I was tired of playing. My phone buzzed with a text from Mara. "Can we talk when you get home? I think there's been a misunderstanding." I typed back, "No misunderstanding. See you at home." But I had no intention of going straight home. First, I was going to make a stop at Pete's place. If I was going to war, I'd need backup. Pete Russo lived in a tidy ranch house about 10 minutes from mine. After 20 years as a cop, he'd retired early and started a security consulting business. Pete was the kind of guy who noticed everything and forgot nothing, which made him a good friend and a dangerous enemy. I found him in his garage, tinkering with some kind of electronic device. "Nick, what brings you by? Shouldn't you be home having dinner with the missus?" "That's what I need to talk to you about." Pete looked up from his workbench. "Finally ready to admit she's been playing you?" "You knew?" "Brother, I've been watching that woman work you over for years. What finally opened your eyes?" I told him about the morning's conversation, the hotel receipt, the whole pattern of behavior I'd been too blind to see. Pete listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding. "So what do you want to do about it?" he asked when I finished. "I want to know exactly what she's been up to, and I want to know who's helping her." Pete grinned. "Now you're talking my language. You got any recordings of these tests she's been running?" "Actually, yeah." I pulled out my phone. I started recording our conversations last week when I noticed she was using the same phrases over and over. I played Pete a few clips. Mara's voice, artificially sweet. "You're being paranoid, honey. I'm just being friendly with my coworkers. If you can't handle that, maybe we need to reconsider this marriage." Pete's expression darkened. "That's not natural speech, Nick. That's scripted. Listen to the pauses, the emphasis. Someone coached her on this." "Her mother?" "Probably. Janet Broome's been running HR games for 30 years. She knows how to manipulate people." Pete set down his tools. "Tell you what, let me make some calls. I've got contacts at Morrison & Associates, and I know a private investigator who specializes in marital cases. We'll get you the full picture." "I don't know if I can afford—" "Don't worry about money right now. Worry about protecting yourself. If Mara's running some kind of long-term con, you need to know before she files first." That thought sent a chill down my spine. In my job, we always planned for the worst-case scenario. I should have been doing the same at home. Pete's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and answered. "Ray Stinson, you old dog. Actually, I was just about to call you." Pete winked at me. "I've got a friend who needs some discreet investigation work. Marital situation. Can you meet us tonight?" After a brief conversation, Pete hung up. "Ray's going to meet us at Murphy's Bar in an hour. He's expensive, but he's thorough." Murphy's was a working-class dive bar near the industrial district, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and everybody minded their own business. Ray Stinson turned out to be a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes and calloused hands. "Pete tells me you've got wife trouble," Ray said after we'd ordered beers. I went through the story again, showing him the recordings and the hotel receipt. Ray listened carefully, taking notes on a small pad. "This pattern you're describing, the scripted threats, the staged jealousy, the involvement of the mother-in-law, it sounds like something I've seen before." "What do you mean?" "There's a type of marital manipulation that's become more common in the last few years. Usually involves family members, often connected to workplace benefits or financial leverage. The spouse creates artificial relationship stress to justify certain behaviors or financial decisions." "You think Mara's stealing money?" "I think Mara's being used by someone who's stealing money. The question is whether she knows it or not." Ray pulled out a tablet and showed me a form. "This is a standard marital investigation contract. I'll need 3 days to get you a complete picture, financial records, communication patterns, workplace connections. My fee is $1,500. I hesitated. That was a lot of money on a dispatcher's salary. Pete leaned forward. "Ray, what if we made this interesting? What if Nick here could provide you with some technical assistance? He's been dispatching emergency calls for 18 years. He knows surveillance, communication protocols, evidence handling." Ray looked at me with new interest. "You know how to operate recording equipment? Handle chain of custody for evidence?" "It's part of my job description." "In that case, we can work out a payment plan, but I'll need you to be an active participant, not just a client." I thought about Mara at home, probably on the phone with her mother, planning their next move. I thought about all the nights I'd apologized for imaginary sins, all the times I'd doubted my own perceptions. "What do you need me to do?" Ray smiled. "First, we're going to wire your house for sound. Then we're going to have a very interesting conversation with your wife's coworkers." The next morning, I went to work early and stayed late, giving Ray and Pete time to install their equipment. When I finally got home, Mara was waiting in the living room, dressed in her best outfit and wearing the perfume I'd bought her for our anniversary. "Nick, honey, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday." I sat down across from her, knowing that every word was being recorded by devices I couldn't see. "Have you?" "I think I've been sending mixed signals. I never meant to hurt you or make you feel insecure. Maybe I've been spending too much time with my coworkers." Her voice had that rehearsed quality again, but now I could hear it clearly. The slight pause before mixed signals, the emphasis on "never meant," the way she hit the word insecure a little too hard. "Which coworkers are we talking about, Mara?" "Well, Greg Palmer mainly, but it's not what you think. He's been helping me with some financial planning." "Financial planning?" "For our future, honey. I want us to be secure. Greg knows about investments, retirement planning. I thought if I could learn from him, I could help us build a better life." I almost laughed. Greg Palmer was a mid-level accounting clerk who drove a flashy muscle car and still lived in an apartment. If he knew about investments, he was keeping it a secret from his bank account. That's very thoughtful of you. What kind of investments has Greg been recommending? Mara shifted uncomfortably. Well, it's complicated. He thinks we should restructure our finances, maybe take out some loans to invest in higher yield opportunities. Loans against what? The house, mainly. And your pension. There it was. The real agenda, finally out in the open. Someone wanted access to my pension fund and our home equity. The question was whether that someone was Mara, Greg, Janet, or all three. How much are we talking about? Greg thinks we could leverage about $200,000. And with the right investments, we could double that in 5 years. I nodded thoughtfully, as if I was actually considering this insanity. Have you talked to anyone else about this? Your mother, maybe? Mom thinks it's a great idea. She says we're wasting our potential by being so conservative. Of course, Janet thought it was a great idea. I was starting to see the shape of this thing. Well, I'd need to see the paperwork before I agreed to anything like that. Greg's putting together a presentation. Maybe we could meet with him this weekend? Sure. Why don't you set that up? Mara smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from her in weeks. She thought she was winning. After she went to bed, I stepped outside to check the mail and found Pete waiting by his truck. You get all that? I asked quietly. Every word. Ray's running financial checks on Greg Palmer and Janet Broome right now. We should have preliminary results tomorrow. What do you think? I think your wife's either the world's most naive woman or she's in on a scheme to clean out your assets. Either way, you're in danger. The next day at work, I could barely concentrate on my calls. Every emergency seemed trivial compared to the crisis brewing in my own life. During my lunch break, Ray called with his first report. Nick, you need to sit down for this. Janet Broome has been embezzling from employee benefit funds for at least 3 years. We're talking about 6 figures, maybe more. How do you know that? I have a contact in the state auditor's office. Morrison and Associates has been quietly investigating Janet's department for months. They've been waiting for enough evidence to file criminal charges. And Mara? Your wife owes her mother $160,000. The debt's been accumulating for 2 years, with interest. Janet's been covering her tracks by moving money through family accounts. I felt sick. So Mara's been lying to me about everything. It gets worse. Greg Palmer isn't just some random coworker. He's Janet's nephew. This whole thing, the fake affair, the jealousy games, the investment scheme, it's all designed to get access to your assets so Janet can cover her theft before the auditors catch up. Jesus Christ. There's more. I talked to 3 of Mara's other dates. They all tell the same story. Janet pays them to take Mara out, create the appearance of infidelity, keep you off balance. It's a psychological operation designed to make you doubt your own perceptions. I thought about all the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I was being paranoid, all the times I'd apologized for suspicions that turned out to be completely accurate. What's my next move? We need to get Mara on record admitting to the scheme. Think you can handle that? After 18 years of marriage and 18 years of dispatch work? Yeah, I can handle it. Good, because tomorrow night we're going to end this thing once and for all. The next evening, I came home to find Mara in the kitchen, cooking my favorite meal. The smell of pot roast and potatoes filled the house, along with the scent of fresh bread. It would have been touching if I didn't know it was all part of the performance. You're home early, she said, kissing my cheek. Thought we should talk about Greg's investment proposal. Oh, good. I was hoping you'd say that. Actually, Greg's coming over tonight to go through the numbers with us. Perfect. Ray and Pete were positioned outside, recording everything. All I had to do was get Mara and Greg to tell the truth. Greg Palmer arrived at 7 sharp, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than I made in a week. He was a thin man with carefully styled hair and an expensive watch, the kind of guy who thought image was everything. Nick, great to finally meet you properly. Mara's told me so much about you. I shook his hand, resisting the urge to squeeze too hard. All good things, I hope. Absolutely. She's very proud of your work with the city. Public service is so important. We sat in the living room while Mara served coffee. Greg opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with documents. Now, I've been analyzing your financial situation, and I think there's tremendous opportunity for growth. The key is leverage. For the next 20 minutes, Greg laid out an elaborate scheme involving home equity loans, pension fund borrowing, and investments in something called emerging market derivatives. It was all nonsense, but it was expensive nonsense that would have left us bankrupt within a year. This sounds very aggressive, I said. What's the worst-case scenario? Greg waved dismissively. There's no real downside if you trust the process. The key is moving quickly before interest rates change. How quickly? Ideally, we'd want to have the paperwork filed by next week. I looked at Mara, who was nodding enthusiastically. What do you think, honey? I think Greg knows what he's talking about, and Mom agrees. She's seen these strategies work for other families. Your mother's seen this work? Oh, yes, Greg jumped in. Janet's been very helpful in structuring these arrangements. She understands the regulatory environment better than most people. There it was, the admission that Janet was involved in the financial planning. Now I needed them to go further. I'm still nervous about borrowing against the pension, I said. That's my retirement security. Mara reached over and took my hand. Honey, don't you trust me? Don't you trust us? Of course I trust you, but I've been burned before by investment schemes. This isn't a scheme, Greg said, a little too quickly. This is a legitimate wealth-building strategy. Then you wouldn't mind if I had my own financial advisor look at the paperwork? Greg and Mara exchanged a look. Well, that might slow things down, Greg said, and timing is really critical here. Why is timing so critical? Another look between them. This time, Mara answered. Greg's been advancing some of the initial costs from his own funds. If we don't move forward soon, he'll need to be reimbursed. What kind of initial costs? Research fees, filing fees, that sort of thing. How much are we talking about? Greg cleared his throat. About $40,000 so far. I nearly choked on my coffee. $40,000? For what? Professional services, Greg said vaguely. Due diligence, regulatory compliance, market analysis. And if I decide not to go forward with this investment? Well, obviously those costs would need to be covered somehow. Now I understood. This wasn't just about stealing my pension. It was about creating immediate debt that would force me to go along with the larger scheme. I see. And where did you get $40,000 to advance these costs? I have my sources, Greg said. Family sources? I pressed. Mara jumped in. Greg's family has been very supportive of our financial planning. Your family, Mara, or Greg's family? What difference does it make? Well, if your mother's been lending money to Greg to invest on our behalf, that creates some complicated relationships, doesn't it? The room went quiet. Greg was sweating now, and Mara was gripping her coffee cup so hard her knuckles were white. I think there might be some misunderstanding about the family connections here, I continued. Greg, didn't you mention that Janet Broome is your aunt? Greg's face went pale. How did I know? Same way I know about the Employee Benefit Fund investigation. Same way I know about the $160,000 Mara owes her mother. Same way I know about the payments to her fake dates. Mara stood up so fast she knocked over her coffee. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself, which as it turns out was a very good idea. Greg was already reaching for his briefcase. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding here. Maybe we should postpone this discussion. Sit down, Greg. Something in my voice made him freeze. 18 years of giving orders in emergency situations had taught me how to project authority. I said, sit down. We're going to finish this conversation. Greg sat. Mara remained standing, her face flushed with anger and panic. Now, here's what's going to happen, I said calmly. You're going to tell me exactly how this scheme works, who planned it, who's getting the money, and what the end game was supposed to be. And you're going to tell me the truth, because I already know most of it. We don't have to listen to this, Mara said. Greg, let's go. If you leave now, I said, I call the state auditor's office and report everything I know about Janet's embezzlement. If you stay and tell me the truth, maybe we can work something out. Greg looked at Mara, then back at me. What kind of arrangement? The kind where you don't go to prison for fraud. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then Greg's shoulders sagged, and he began to talk. It started about 3 years ago, Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Janet got in trouble with the employee benefit funds. She'd been borrowing from them to cover some personal investments that went bad. What kind of investments? Real estate speculation. She thought she could flip some properties and pay the money back before anyone noticed. But the market crashed, and she was stuck with worthless land and a huge hole in the fund accounts. Mara sat back down, staring at her hands. I didn't know any of this when it started. When did you find out? About 2 years ago. Mom came to me crying, said she was going to lose her job and her pension if she couldn't replace the money. She asked me to co-sign some loans. How much? At first, just $20,000. But the interest rates were terrible, and the payments kept growing. Before I knew it, I owed over $100,000. Greg picked up the story. That's when Janet came up with the marriage plan. She figured if Mara could get access to your pension and home equity, we could pay off the debt, and maybe even make some profit. So you recruited Greg to play the role of the other man? It wasn't supposed to be like that, Mara said quickly. At first, the plan was just to get you to agree to some investments, but you're so careful with money, so suspicious of anything that sounds risky. So Janet decided to use psychological manipulation instead. She said if I could make you feel insecure about our marriage, you'd be more willing to take financial risks to prove your commitment, Mara admitted. And the other dates, the coworkers, Greg answered. Janet paid them, usually just dinner money, sometimes a little extra. They were supposed to be seen with Mara in public, create gossip, make you think she was popular with other men. I felt a mixture of rage and disgust. So our entire marriage for the last 2 years has been a lie. No, Mara said. I love you, Nick. I never wanted to hurt you. But I was scared. Mom said if we didn't fix this, she'd go to prison and I'd be responsible for her debts. And you believed that? She's my mother. She raised me alone after Dad died. I couldn't let her destroy her life. So you decided to destroy mine instead. Mara started crying. Real tears this time, not the theatrical kind she'd been using for months. Greg cleared his throat. Look, Nick, I know this looks bad, but nobody wanted to actually hurt you. We just needed access to some funds temporarily. The investment opportunities are real. We could have made money for everyone. Shut up, Greg. You're a third-rate con man who can't even afford his own apartment. Hey, that's not... I said shut up. I turned back to Mara. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you're going to call Janet and tell her the plan is off. You're going to tell her I know everything, and if she doesn't turn herself in to the auditors within 48 hours, I'm going to do it for her. She'll never agree to that. Then she'll go to prison for embezzlement instead of just losing her job. Her choice. What about me? Mara asked. What about you? You're an adult who chose to participate in a conspiracy to defraud your husband. You can face the consequences. Are you going to divorce me? I looked at her for a long moment. 2 years ago, I would have said that nothing could make me stop loving this woman. Now I felt nothing but pity and disgust. Mara, our marriage ended the day you decided to treat me like a mark in a con game. The divorce papers are just a formality. Greg stood up again. Look, maybe we can all work something out. Nobody has to involve lawyers or auditors. We can figure out a payment plan. The front door opened, and Pete walked in, followed by Ray Stinson. Evening, folks, Pete said cheerfully. Hope we're not interrupting anything important. Greg's eyes went wide. Who are these people? Friends of mine, I said. Pete, Ray, meet Greg Palmer and my soon-to-be ex-wife, Mara. They've just been confessing to conspiracy, fraud, and embezzlement. Ray held up a small recording device. Got every word. This should make the divorce proceedings very straightforward. Mara looked at me with something approaching hatred. You set us up. I protected myself. There's a difference. You bastard. You self-righteous, paranoid bastard. Do you have any idea what you've just done? I've just saved my pension, my house, and probably my sanity. What you and your family have done to yourselves is your own problem. Greg was edging toward the door. Pete stepped in front of him. Going somewhere, Greg. I don't have to stay here and listen to this. Actually, you do. See, we've got you on tape admitting to fraud. You can either stay here and work out some kind of restitution arrangement, or you can leave and we'll turn the tapes over to the prosecutor tomorrow morning. Greg sat back down. Ray opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. I've taken the liberty of preparing some paperwork. Confession statements, restitution agreements, cooperation agreements. If everyone signs tonight, we might be able to keep this out of criminal court. What kind of restitution? Mara asked. Full repayment of any money taken from Nick's accounts, plus interest and damages. Estimated total of about $200,000. We don't have that kind of money. Then you'll have to find it. Sell your car, liquidate your retirement accounts, ask Janet to return what she stole from the employee fund. Not my problem. I watched Mara's face as the reality of her situation sank in. For 2 years, she'd been living in a fantasy world where she could manipulate her way out of any problem. Now she was facing real consequences, and there was no one left to con. I need to call my mother, she said finally. Go ahead, I said. But remember, she's got 48 hours to turn herself in. After that, the choice gets taken away from her. As Mara dialed Janet's number with shaking hands, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. A peace. The games were over. The lies were exposed. Whatever happened next, at least I'd be dealing with reality instead of manufactured drama. It was going to be a long night, but for the first time in 2 years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. The call to Janet Broome was everything I'd expected, and more. Mara put the phone on speaker, and we all listened as Janet's carefully constructed world came crashing down. What do you mean he knows everything? Janet's voice was sharp with panic. He recorded our conversation, Mom. He knows about the employee fund, the debt, all of it. That's impossible. We were so careful. Pete leaned forward. Mrs. Broome, this is Pete Russo, Nick's friend. I'm a former police detective, and I'm here to tell you that you weren't careful at all. We have financial records, communication logs, and witness statements. Your scheme is completely exposed. Who is this? Mara, who are these people? Ray took the phone. Mrs. Broome, my name is Ray Stinson, and I'm a licensed private investigator. I've been working with the state auditor's office to document your embezzlement from the employee benefit fund. You have 48 hours to surrender yourself for questioning, or will be forced to file a criminal complaint. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. Then Janet's voice came back, cold and controlled. You don't understand the situation you're interfering with. My daughter's financial obligations are a family matter. Nick has no legal standing to. Actually, Ray interrupted, Nick has every legal standing. Your daughter attempted to defraud him of his pension and home equity. That's a felony in this state. Mara would never... Mom, Mara said quietly. I told them everything. About the loans, the fake dates, the whole plan. They have it all on tape. Another long silence. When Janet spoke again, her voice was different. Smaller, older, defeated. How much trouble am I in? Ray consulted his notes. Embezzlement from employee funds, conspiracy to commit fraud, wire fraud if you used electronic transfers, possibly racketeering if we can prove this was an ongoing criminal enterprise. You're looking at 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Unless, Janet asked, unless you cooperate fully, make complete restitution, and plead guilty to reduced charges. In that case, you might get probation and lose your pension. And Mara? Mara's situation depends on how cooperative she is and whether Nick decides to press charges. All eyes turned to me. I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, sitting there with tears streaming down her face, and tried to feel something other than contempt. Mara, I said, I want you to understand something. For 2 years, you've been lying to me, manipulating me, and stealing from me. You've turned our marriage into a criminal conspiracy. You've made me doubt my own sanity and question every instinct I had. I know, she whispered. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't give me back 2 years of my life. Sorry doesn't repair the trust you've destroyed. So what do you want? I thought about it for a moment. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Or just to be free of this toxic situation? I want my money back. All of it. I want a divorce with no contest from you on any terms. I want you out of my house by the end of the week, and I want a written confession that I can use to protect myself if any other debts or schemes surface later. And if I do all that, then I won't file criminal charges against you personally. Your mother's on her own. She's the one who stole from the employee fund. But I won't add fraud charges against you. Mara nodded slowly. Okay, I can do that. Greg, who had been silent during the phone call, finally spoke up. What about me? Pete grinned. What about you, Greg? You're a small-time con man who got in over his head. You'll pay back every penny you took, you'll sign a confession, and you'll never contact Nick or his family again. In return, we'll recommend probation instead of jail time. I don't have the money to pay back? Then you'll get a second job, or a third job, or you'll sell everything you own. Not our problem. Ray started laying out documents on the coffee table. All right, let's get this paperwork sorted out. The sooner everyone signs, the sooner we can start the restitution process. For the next 2 hours, we went through every detail of the scheme. Mara signed a complete confession detailing her role in the psychological manipulation and the financial fraud. Greg signed a statement admitting to his participation and agreeing to repay $40,000 plus interest. Janet, speaking through the phone, agreed to surrender herself to the auditors and make full restitution to the employee fund. By midnight, it was over. Greg slunk out of the house like a beaten dog. Mara went upstairs to pack her things, moving like a sleepwalker. Pete and Ray gathered their equipment and prepared to leave. You did good tonight, Pete said, clapping me on the shoulder. I know it wasn't easy. Actually, it was easier than I thought it would be. Once I stopped trying to save a marriage that was already dead, the rest was just logistics. Ray handed me a business card. Call me if you need anything else. And Nick, you might want to consider changing your locks and your bank passwords, just in case. After they left, I sat alone in my living room, listening to Mara moving around upstairs. In a few hours, I'd have to go to work and pretend everything was normal. But nothing would ever be normal again, and that was probably a good thing. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This isn't over. You have no idea what you've started. I showed the message to Pete, who was still in his driveway. "Janet," he asked. "Probably. Think I should be worried." Pete considered this. Janet Broome's about to lose her job, her pension, and possibly her freedom. She's got nothing left to lose, which makes her dangerous. But she's also a white-collar criminal, not a violent offender. Just be careful for the next few weeks. I went back inside and double-checked all the locks. Upstairs, Mara was still packing. I could hear her crying softly, but I felt no urge to comfort her. That part of my life was over. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of rebuilding. New bank accounts, new locks, new life. It would be strange being alone after 16 years of marriage, but it couldn't be worse than the last 2 years of lies and manipulation. I poured myself a beer and sat down to watch the late news. The lead story was about a corruption investigation at a local company, something about embezzled employee benefits. I smiled and raised my beer to the television. "Here's to the truth," I said to the empty room. Better late than never. 3 days later, Janet Broome made her move. I was at work, halfway through my morning shift, when Rita got a call that made her face go white. "Nick, you need to take this. It's about Mara." I picked up the phone to hear a voice I didn't recognize. Young, female, probably a nurse or social worker. "Mr. Dalton? This is Sarah Chen from Metro General Hospital. Your wife was brought in about an hour ago. She's asking for you." "What happened?" "Apparent suicide attempt. Overdose of prescription medication. She's stable now, but she says she has information about some kind of criminal investigation that she needs to share with you." I felt a familiar chill. In my line of work, you learn to recognize when someone's running a con, even over the phone. Did she specifically ask for me, or did someone suggest she should call me? "Well, her mother was here earlier. She said you'd want to know." Of course Janet was involved. This had her fingerprints all over it. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I called Pete on my way to the hospital. Janet's making a play. Mara's in the hospital with an apparent suicide attempt, and they're saying she has information about the investigation." "It's a setup," Pete said immediately. "Janet's trying to create leverage. If Mara's in the hospital claiming she tried to kill herself because of your investigation, it makes you look like the bad guy." "That's what I figured. Can you meet me there?" "Already on my way." Metro General was a typical city hospital, understaffed, overcrowded, and running on caffeine and determination. I found Mara in the emergency department, lying in a bed with an IV in her arm. She looked terrible, but not like someone who'd actually tried to kill herself. "Nick," she said weakly when she saw me, "I'm so glad you came." "What happened, Mara?" "I couldn't handle the guilt anymore. What we did to you, what Mom made me do, I just wanted it to end." Standing beside her bed was Janet Broome, looking like a grieving mother. She was a small woman with steel gray hair and the kind of face that could project either maternal warmth or corporate ruthlessness, depending on what the situation required. "Nick," Janet said, "I think we need to talk." "I think we're past the talking stage, Janet. My daughter nearly died because of the stress you've put this family under. Surely we can find some way to resolve this that doesn't destroy everyone involved." Pete appeared in the doorway behind me. "Mrs. Broome, I'm going to have to ask you to step outside." "This is a private family matter." "No, ma'am, this is a criminal investigation, and you're not family anymore." Janet's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw the calculating predator underneath. Then she composed herself and turned back to Mara. "Sweetheart, tell Nick what you told me about the real situation." Mara looked at me with what she probably thought were soulful eyes. "Nick, there's something I never told you. The money Mom took from the employee fund, it wasn't for investments, it was for my medical bills." "What medical bills?" "I've been seeing a psychiatrist for depression. The sessions weren't covered by insurance, and the medication was expensive. Mom was just trying to help me." I stared at her for a moment, then started laughing. "You think this is funny?" Janet snapped. "I think it's pathetic. Mara, you're lying in a hospital bed claiming you tried to kill yourself in order to run another con on me. Do you have any idea how sick that is?" "It's not a con. I really am depressed." "Of course you're depressed. You just destroyed your marriage and probably your mother's life for $160,000. Depression is the least of your problems." Pete stepped forward. "Mrs. Broome, I need to inform you that this conversation is being recorded, and anything you say can be used as evidence in the ongoing investigation." Janet's face went pale. "You can't record private conversations in a hospital." "Actually, we can, if we have reasonable suspicion that a crime is being planned or discussed. And given that you are both subjects of an active fraud investigation, we definitely have reasonable suspicion." A doctor appeared in the doorway, a tired-looking woman in scrubs. Excuse me, but I need to speak with the family about the patient's condition. I'm the husband, I said. What's her actual condition? The doctor glanced at her chart. She ingested approximately 6 tablets of over-the-counter sleep medication, enough to make her drowsy and nauseous, but nowhere near a lethal dose. We'll keep her for observation, but she should be fine to go home this evening. So, not actually a suicide attempt. Well, that's not really for me to determine, but medically speaking, this was more like taking too much NyQuil than attempting self-harm. Janet jumped in quickly. Doctor, my daughter has been under tremendous stress. Her husband has been threatening her, making accusations. Ma'am, the doctor interrupted, I'm only here to discuss medical matters. If there are legal issues, you'll need to speak with hospital security or the police. Pete smiled. Actually, doctor, we are the police. Well, I'm a former detective working with the current investigation, and we'd like to request a psychiatric evaluation for the patient. What kind of evaluation? We need to determine whether she's competent to make legal decisions and whether she's been coached to make false statements. Janet went rigid. You can't do that. She's my daughter, and I'm making medical decisions for her. Actually, I said, she's still my wife until the divorce is final, and I'm requesting the psychiatric evaluation. The doctor looked between us, clearly wishing she was anywhere else. I'll need to check with our legal department about the evaluation request. In the meantime, visiting hours are limited to immediate family only. That's fine, Pete said. Mrs. Broome, you'll need to leave. I'm not leaving my daughter alone with him. You don't have a choice. Hospital security is already on the way. As if on cue, 2 security guards appeared in the hallway. Janet looked at them, then at Pete, then at me. This isn't over, she said quietly. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I know exactly what I'm dealing with. A small-time embezzler who's desperate enough to use her own daughter as a pawn. You're not nearly as smart as you think you are, Janet. After Janet left, I sat down beside Mara's bed. She was staring at the ceiling, no longer bothering to maintain the facade of distress. So what's the real plan here? I asked. Was this supposed to make me feel guilty enough to drop the investigation? Mom thought if you saw me in the hospital, you'd realize how much damage you were causing. And you went along with it. I didn't have a choice. She said if I didn't cooperate, she'd make sure I went to prison along with her. I shook my head. Mara, do you understand that what you just did, faking a suicide attempt to manipulate a criminal investigation, is another felony? Her eyes widened. What do you mean? I mean, you just added obstruction of justice and filing a false police report to your list of crimes. The psychiatric evaluation isn't just to determine your competence, it's to document your pattern of deception and manipulation. But I thought, Mom said, your mother is a criminal who's about to go to prison. Maybe you should stop taking legal advice from her. Pete returned with a clipboard full of paperwork. Good news, Nick. The psychiatric evaluation is approved, and the doctor agrees that this wasn't a genuine suicide attempt. Bad news for Mara. The hospital is required to report suspected false emergency calls to the police. What does that mean? Mara asked. It means you're about to be arrested for filing a false report and wasting emergency services resources. The ambulance that brought you here could have been responding to a real emergency. Mara started crying again, but this time it looked genuine. I just wanted this to be over. It is over, I said. Your mother's scheme failed. You're going to face the consequences of your choices. And I'm going to get on with my life. I stood up to leave, then turned back for one final look at the woman I'd been married to for 16 years. Mara, I want you to understand something. I didn't destroy our marriage. You did. I didn't ruin your life. You did. And I didn't put your mother in this situation. She did that to herself. I know, she whispered. Good. Because that's the last conversation we're ever going to have. I walked out of the hospital with Pete, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind us, Mara was about to be arrested. Janet was about to be indicted. Greg was working 3 jobs to pay restitution, and I was free. The divorce was final on a Tuesday morning in February. I sat in the courthouse with my lawyer, Cece Lang, watching as the judge signed the papers that officially ended my marriage to Mara Dalton. Congratulations, Cece said as we walked down the courthouse steps. You're a free man. Thanks. What's the final damage report? Janet Broome pleaded guilty to embezzlement and got 3 years in federal prison plus full restitution. Mara pleaded guilty to conspiracy and fraud. She got probation and community service, but she'll be paying you back for the next 10 years. Greg Palmer is working as a night janitor and a weekend security guard, and he's already paid back $15,000 of what he owes you. And the employee benefit fund? Fully restored. Janet had to liquidate her retirement accounts and sell her house, but all the stolen money was returned with interest. I looked up at the gray February sky and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Optimism. "You know what the funny thing is?" I said to Cece. "I'm actually grateful this happened." "How so?" "If Mara hadn't gotten greedy, I might have spent the rest of my life married to someone who saw me as nothing but a source of income. At least now I know who I can trust." My phone buzzed with a text from Pete. "Drinks tonight to celebrate your freedom?" I texted back, "Absolutely. Murphy's Bar at 7. "One more thing," Cece said as we reached my truck. "I got a call from the state auditor's office. They want to offer you a job." "Doing what?" "Investigating financial fraud cases. Apparently your work on this case impressed them. They said they could use someone with your combination of investigation skills and real-world experience." I thought about it for a moment. After 18 years of dispatching emergency calls, maybe it was time for a change. Maybe it was time to help other people who were being conned and manipulated by people they trusted. "Tell them I'm interested." That evening at Murphy's Bar, Pete raised his beer in a toast. To Nick Dalton, who proved that sometimes the good guys really do win. "I'll drink to that," I said. Around us, the bar was full of working-class people unwinding after long shifts. Honest people doing honest work, trying to build decent lives for themselves and their families. My people. "So, what's next?" Pete asked. "New job, new life, new everything. And this time, I'm going to trust my instincts from the beginning. Any regrets?" I thought about Mara, probably sitting in her studio apartment, working her community service hours and writing restitution checks. I thought about Janet, starting her 3rd month in federal prison. I thought about Greg, mopping floors and wondering how his life had gone so wrong. "No regrets," I said. "Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is finding out who people really are." Pete nodded. "To the truth, then." "To the truth?" We clinked glasses and drank to new beginnings.